Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today, we're going back, way back, to the very start of a band that, well, basically changed rock music forever. Led Zeppelin.
That's right. We all know the huge songs, the riffs, the whole legend, really.
Yeah.
But how did Led Zeppelin actually, begin? Where did it come from?
Exactly. And we're going to dig into that using some great source material we have here. Think of it as our guide to those really crucial, maybe surprising early moments.
Yeah, our mission, if you like, is to get past the mythology,
Hmm.
to really look at how this specific group of musicians came together and, well, how they sparked something so massive.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Where does the story really kick off?
Well, it properly starts with the end of another band, actually, the Yardbirds. They were pretty influential themselves, but by 1968, they were kind of imploding.
Falling apart.
Right. But the guitarist, Jimmy Page, he found himself stuck. He still had tour dates they were obligated to play.
Ah, okay. So he needed a band, basically, and
Yeah.
fast.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That obligation, that tour, it turned out to be the catalyst for everything that followed.
So who did he pull together for this new project?
Well, the first piece was John Paul Jones, a really well-respected session player, bassist, keyboardist, knew his stuff,
A known quantity, then.
definitely. Then came Robert Plant, who at the time was, well, he wasn't really known at all, a singer from the Midlands.
Really? Little known. That's surprising.
Yeah. And finally, John Bonham on drums, an absolute powerhouse. Later got that nickname Bonzo.
Bonzo. Apt.
Very. Because of that huge, forceful sound he had. It's kind of amazing thinking how unknown Plant was right before this.
Absolutely. So these four guys, they didn't just burst onto the scene as Led Zeppelin, though, did they?
No, not immediately. Those first gigs, the ones Page was obligated to do, they actually played them as the Yardbirds.
Just use the old name.
Yeah, to fulfill the contract.
Oh.
And for a little while after that, they actually called themselves the New Yardbirds.
The new Yardbirds. Doesn't quite have that iconic ring, does it?
Not really, no. So how they got to Led Zeppelin? Well, that's one of those classic rock stories.
Oh, okay. I think I know this one. It involves The Who, right?
It does. Keith Moon, specifically.
Yeah.
The story goes, Page was talking about his new band, and Moon just quipped, something like it would go down like a lead balloon.
Meaning it would fail spectacularly. Nice vote of confidence.
Yeah, exactly. Bit of cynical drummer humor, maybe.
So how does Lead Balloon become Led Zeppelin?
Well, Peter Grant, who became their manager, a really key figure, he suggested dropping the A from lead, apparently, so people wouldn't mispronounce it as lead,
Smart. Practical.
and the Zeppelin part.
Yeah.
That seems to have been more Page's idea. He liked the image, that combination of heavy and light, combustible but also graceful, like the airship.
Heavy and light. Yeah, that actually really fits their music, doesn't it? That dynamic.
Okay.
Okay, so they've got the players. They've sort of got the name. What were those very first days like playing together?
Right, so the first time the four of them actually played music together, it was August 68. And apparently it was just in a room below a record shop, Gerrard Street, London.
Wow. Not exactly glamorous. Can you imagine hearing that sound coming through the floorboards?
Right. And the first song they played, reportedly, was Train Kept A-Rollin'.
Which the Yardbirds had also played.
Exactly. It was a blues tune. Johnny Burnett did a version.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Yardbirds covered it too. And Jones, John Paul Jones, he said later that as soon as he heard Bonham start playing, he just knew. He thought, this is going to be great.
Instant chemistry.
Seems like it. He said they just locked in immediately.
Must have been electric in that little room. And they didn't just rehearse, did they? Didn't they end up in a studio quite early on?
Yeah, that's another interesting bit. Even before they went off on that Scandinavian tour as the new Yardbirds, all four of them were actually on a recording session together.
Ooh. For who?
For an artist called P.J. Proby. On his album 3 Week Hero, they played on a track called Jim's Blues.
All four of them.
All four. And apparently Plant played harmonica on it. So technically that's their first studio recording as a unit.
Plant on harmonica. That's a great piece of trivia. Okay, so then they did that Scandinavian tour as the New Yardbirds.
Right. That was their first time playing live shows together. Kicked off in Denmark, September 7th, 1968, at the Gladsaxe Teen Club.
Gladsaxe Teen Club.
Yeah.
Love it. So that tour was kind of like a working tryout.
Pretty much. Honing the set, building that connection on stage.
And that led, pretty quickly it seems, to recording their first album. The pace seems really fast.
It was incredibly fast. They came back from Scandinavia and basically went straight into the studio. The first album was recorded and mixed in, get this, 9 days.
9 days. That's insane.
Totally. And Page apparently paid for the recording sessions himself. He fronted the costs. It was essentially just their live set from that tour, put down on tape, raw.
Wow. Okay, 9 days is unbelievable. But they still had the name issue hanging over them at that point, the new Yardbirds.
They did. After the album was done, they got a letter, a cease and desist from Chris Dreja, the old Yardbirds bassist.
Saying stop using the name.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
He'd only given permission for the Scandinavian dates.
Yeah.
So that kind of forced their hand. They had to commit to a new name.
And Led Zeppelin was ready and waiting?
Seems so. So now they have the official name. They have an album in the can. Next step, a record deal. And they didn't just get any old deal.
No, this is another legendary part of the story, isn't it? The Atlantic Records deal.
Absolutely legendary. November 1968, they signed with Atlantic. The advance was $143,000.
Which today is...
What?
Over $1 million?
Easily.
Yeah.
About $1.3 million in today's money, yeah. It was, at the time, the biggest record deal ever given to a brand new band.
For a band nobody had technically heard as Led Zeppelin yet, that's a huge leap of faith.
It really was. It kind of marked a shift, you know. Labels starting to see rock bands as, like, long-term album artists, not just singles machines.
What made Atlantic take such a massive gamble?
Well, Atlantic had this amazing history with blues, soul, jazz, but they were getting interested in the British rock scene, progressive rock.
Right.
But the amazing thing is, the story goes, Atlantic executives never actually saw them play live before signing them.
No way. How did that happen?
The recommendation came from Dusty Springfield. She was friends with John Paul Jones, recording for Atlantic herself. She basically vouched for them.
Signed on a recommendation. That's incredible. Speaks volumes about the buzz, I guess.
For sure. But it wasn't just the money that was groundbreaking about that deal, was it?
No, absolutely not. The other huge thing was the artistic control they got.
Unprecedented, really.
Oh.
They negotiated for and got control over pretty much everything. When albums came out, tour schedules, album artwork, content promotion, even deciding which songs, if any, would be singles.
That's huge for a new band. Normally the label calls all those shots.
Exactly. And that freedom, you know, that was crucial. It let them develop their sound without interference. It allowed for that experimentation that made them, oh, Led Zeppelin.
Must have been so important for letting them be who they were. And they were smart about the business side too, right? Publishing.
Yeah, very savvy. They set up their own company, super hyped to handle all their publishing rights, kept control.
Okay, so name sorted, amazing record deal, artistic freedom. Now it's time to actually be Led Zeppelin in public.
Right. So even before the name was official, they did a UK tour as the New Yardbirds. That started October 4th, 1968.
Okay.
Their very first gig, billed as Led Zeppelin. That was October 25th, 1968. University of Surrey.
And they hit America pretty quickly, too.
Oh, yeah. Richard Cole, their tour manager, who became a bit notorious, later on, he set up their first North American tour near the end of 68.
Yeah.
And it was during that tour, January 13th, 1969, that the first album, Led Zeppelin, came out in the U.S.
And it landed well, didn't it?
It did pretty well straight away. Hit number 10 on the Billboard chart in the U.S., then number 6 in the U.K. when it came out there in March.
And the sound. What were people saying about it then?
Critics picked up on the big riffs, the heavy rhythms, but also the psychedelic blues stuff, the sort of groovy shuffles, even hints of English folk music in there.
So the blueprint was already there.
Definitely. Tracks like Good Times, Bad Times, Dazed and Confused, Communication Breakdown. It was seen pretty quickly as a big step for hard rock, even early heavy metal.
It's a turning point, really, and things just exploded from there, right? More touring, more music.
Relentlessly.
Yeah.
In that first year alone, they did something like 4 U.S. tours and 4 U.K. tours, just constantly playing.
Wow. That's intense.
And somehow in the middle of all that, they recorded and released the second album, Led Zeppelin II.
Which was even bigger, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Led Zeppelin II went straight to number 1, both U.S. and U.K. It was recorded mostly while they were on the road in different studios across North America.
Recorded on tour. That explains some of that raw energy, maybe.
Could be. And the sound got even heavier. People described it as brutal and direct. Songs like Whole Lotta Love, Ramble On. This album really cemented their sound, and yeah, its influence on heavy metal is undeniable.
Someone even called it the starting point for heavy metal.
Yeah, Steve Waxman, a music scholar. He argued Led Zeppelin II was basically the musical starting point for heavy metal. Big claim, but you can see why.
It really established that massive, powerful sound. Now, you mentioned singles earlier. Zeppelin weren't really keen on them, were they? They were album artists.
Very much so. They saw their albums as, like, complete works, start-to-finish listening experiences. They didn't like chopping up songs for radio play.
And Peter Grant, the manager, backed that up.
Strongly. Especially in the UK. He pushed this pro-album stance. Rock wasn't huge on UK radio or TV then anyway, so the focus was on albums and live shows.
But singles did come out in the US.
Yeah, sometimes kind of against their wishes, it seems. Atlantic Records pushed them out. The big one was Whole Lotta Love. An edited version came out as a single in the US.
And it was a hit.
Huge hit. Got to number 4 on Billboard in early 1970. Sold over 1 million copies. So, despite the band's feelings, it definitely boosted their profile massively over there.
Right. A bit of tension between art and commerce there. And they also started avoiding TV around this time.
They did, yeah. As the live shows got bigger and bigger, they felt that was the real way to experience the band. Not on some tinny TV screen. They wanted people to come see them live.
And those early live shows, they were something else, weren't they? Heard they were incredibly long.
Oh, yeah. Legendary for it. Early Zeppelin concerts could go on for, like, 4 hours plus.
Oh, hours.
Yeah. They'd stretch out the songs, loads of improvisation, really showing off their musicianship and that kind of telepathy they had on stage. There are tons of bootlegs from that era, capturing that raw energy.
And maybe less gloriously, that period of intense touring is also when their reputation for offstage antics started.
Yeah, that's when those stories began to build up. The whole rock and roll excess thing. How much is true? How much is exaggerated? Well, that's probably another deep dive entirely.
Definitely. Okay, so after the powerhouse rock of the first 2 albums, they took a bit of a left turn with Led Zeppelin III, didn't they?
They really did. A deliberate shift. In 1970, Page and Plant went off to this remote cottage in Wales called Bron-yr Aur. No electricity, apparently.
Huh?
Very rustic.
Bron-yr Aur.
And they started writing material there that was much more acoustic, influenced by folk music, Celtic sounds.
So a very different vibe from Led Zeppelin II.
Completely different. It was them showing their range, their versatility, proving they weren't just about heavy riffs.
How did that go down? Must have surprised people.
It definitely did. Some fans, some critics were a bit thrown by it. They were expecting more hard rock, and they got this album with lots of acoustic guitars and mandolins. The reaction was quite mixed initially.
Did that bother the band?
Seems like it did. It apparently added to their, let's say, distrust of the music press. But despite the mixed reviews, Led Zeppelin III still went to number 1 in the UK and the US.
So commercially, it still worked.
Yeah.
Even on that more acoustic album, there was still a killer rock track, wasn't there?
Oh, absolutely, the opener. Immigrant Song, instantly recognizable riff, Plant's Wail, classic Zepp.
And that was released as a single in the US.
It was, yeah.
Okay.
Now, it cared reportedly against the band's wishes.
Yeah.
But it still did well, hit the top 20 on Billboard.
Funny how even when they resisted, the songs still found their way out and connected. Before we wrap up this look at the early years, just quickly on gear, Page's guitars in this era.
Okay, yeah. Very early on, like Yardbirds and maybe the first Zepp tour, he was using his Fender Telecaster, the famous Dragon Telecaster.
Yeah.
But from about 1969 onwards, his main weapon became the Gibson Les Paul, the number 1 Les Paul, the Sunburst one. That really became his sound.
The iconic Page sound. Got it. So looking back at this whirlwind start,
Yeah.
It's quite a story. From the Yardbirds collapsing to this massive record deal, 2 huge albums, intense touring, all in a very short space of time.
It really is remarkable. It's this mix of, Chance Page needing a band ambition and just this incredible, undeniable musical chemistry between the 4 of them.
They came out of the Yardbirds' shadow, but had this really clear vision and, crucially, that freedom from the record deal to just do their thing.
Exactly. Those early albums, that constant touring, it just laid the groundwork for everything that followed.
Yeah.
Built that legend.
And for me, the aha moment is still maybe the name. How something so huge, so iconic, came from a throwaway joke by Keith Moon.
Yeah, the lead balloon thing. It's wild how that became Led Zeppelin. It just shows you, doesn't it? Sometimes the biggest things start in the most casual ways.
It really does. So considering how they started almost accidentally with that unusual record deal, the mixed reviews early on, their stubbornness about artistic control, here's something to think about. What single thing, what element was most vital in pushing Led Zeppelin beyond just success into becoming this enduring, almost mythical force in music history?
That's a great question to ponder.
Something for you to chew on until our next deep dive. Thanks for joining us.